Hey guys, I'm Si and welcome to A.C.E Podcast Nation. This is series 2 of our revamped and new look mental health and sports series. This time around, the series is focusing specifically on footballers. We'll be talking to current and ex-footballers about their difficulties with mental health, addiction and similar subjects. In the current climate of the world, I think speaking about mental health issues is more important than ever. And these shows will just be an open and honest account of some of the issues faced by these athletes at the height of their career, after their career, or wherever it may be, and how it's affected their lives. If you saw episode 1, we spoke to former Manchester United and Newcastle winger Keith Gillespie, and he spoke about his difficulties with gambling and how it affected his mental health with depression and things like that, and the effect that it had on his life, and the extreme amounts of money which he lost in a very quick amount of time. And also he discussed the difficulties facing young footballers these days, maybe being more towards gambling rather than going out and drinking and things like this with online gambling. But it was a really interesting show, so check it out. You can get a video format of all of our shows, including that one, youtube.com/Ace Podcast Nation. Please subscribe, click the bell to be notified. That's the best way to support the channel. And of course, you can also get the audio versions at the usual podcast and radio apps everywhere. Links in the description. So, with no further ado, joining me for each episode is someone who's appeared on the channel many times before now. And he's back again to help us talk to our guests, spread awareness when it comes to mental health. I'm very happy to welcome my co-host for this series, mental health support worker Jacob, back to the show. Welcome, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. I always think when you say like support worker, I have to sort of be professional, but yeah, no, I'm good. I think the pods have been great, but I think we were talking about honesty and stuff like that. The last couple of days have been a bit of a struggle, but I think that's the good thing about these pods. We can be open and sort of it's been great doing these things. They've been helpful for me, but also my football group started back up, the one I run, so it's great seeing like the power of football, and how it affects people. We were saying, just seeing it sort of from an outsider and seeing like these people that hadn't met up for about 6-7 months meet back up, and it's great. So that's some of the great stories we have about football. So yeah, I'm great. I'm really looking forward to tonight.
Yeah, it brings people together, football, not necessarily at a professional level, just socially. It just brings people together, and I think over these last 7 months, that a lot of people who I know, they're missing that kind of weekly training and matches and five-a-side, whatever it may be, and just the social aspect of it, going for a beer afterwards, whatever it may be. Just getting out the house, and obviously in the current climate it's very difficult. I don't know what it's like for you at the moment, but in Cardiff we're in lockdown with no kind of date set for when that ends, which means you can't leave Cardiff. So like me and my wife said yesterday, we'll go for a drive tomorrow when we drop the kids to school, and then we can't go out of Cardiff, so what are we going to do? We've seen Cardiff a lot, but there we go. Anyway, I ramble on. Someone who's very used to my rambling, our guest for today, Andy Campbell football shows, been live on a Monday and a Friday. Ex-Middlesbrough, Bolton, Sheffield United striker, Cardiff City legend, Mr. Andy Campbell. Welcome, my friend. A change of seats for you.
Yeah, I'm nervous today. I feel a little bit under pressure, but no, thank you for having me, fellas. It's something really important, and I think to get these kind of messages across to people and just to be there for people who are going through the same or similar struggles, I think is key for me, because you know what I mean, forget what you see exterior wise, smiles and stuff, you know what I mean. For me it's more than that, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And
yes, spot on, mate. I mean, me and you speak a lot, obviously, but like, you never know how someone's doing, behind their smile, or even when you might send them a message and say, right, and they'll go, yeah, everything's fine, and it might not be. And we will delve into that a bit on tonight's show. It's kind of one of them things at the moment. It's very difficult for everybody, and I think it's more important than ever that people are kind of checking in with people who you haven't spoken to for a while, just seeing if they're doing all right, as it were. But I think I feel like I repeat this on every show, but like, for me with these shows, that's what's important, is trying to reach people, rather than if it gets, I'd rather get one view and like whatever we talk about in that particular show resonates with one person, and they don't feel that they're on their own. They don't have to struggle on their own, rather than get like a million views and kind of people just watch it and move on. But that's.
And I think we were saying before, like some people, we're very lucky in our positions that we are able to talk about mental health, and we've heard stories from friends, or we've got our own experiences. But some people just maybe have struggled in silence, don't have anyone in their community that sort of openly talk about it. So it's great that we can offer this opportunity for some people to maybe it's the first time they've heard men talking openly about mental health, and it not being a shame or a guilt thing. So yeah, it's great.
100%, mate. And I think like for people, we're all like of similar kind of generation. I think like when I was younger, growing up, like your feelings wasn't something which you were kind of taught to talk about. And I think that is like a really common thing when I spoke to different people of different professions, all of like that similar generation of say from about 30 to 60, all of them as kids and teenagers weren't really encouraged to kind of say if they were struggling or this, that and the other, which makes it very difficult when you become an adult to then deal with those periods of kind of darkness or when you're feeling a bit low. Right, okay, Andy, on to you, my friend. So for people who maybe not football fans, let's give them a little background of you. Tell us in your kind of your own words about you, your upbringing, your career. How did it all begin for Andy Campbell, and how did you get to where you are today?
My name's Andy Campbell. I'm 41 years old. I was brought up in a town, Stockton-on-Tees. It wasn't the greatest of areas to be brought up in, but my mum and dad gave me everything that I ever wanted. But I do feel as though I was extremely lucky being involved in football, because I think football saved me, and it saved me from the uncertainty for me, and something which I probably wasn't ready for at a young age. And you know what I mean? I'm a big advocate now of working in schools, of in education, because I left school with absolutely zero. Hard for me because I wanted to be a footballer, and I tried to get into football, but I didn't have that backup plan, so I really had to go above and beyond. And a lot of people who didn't have that opportunity and the luck that I had, you know what I mean, I would have feared for myself really of where it could have ended up.
Yeah, I think one of the subjects which has come up in kind of this series and will come up in this series is with being a professional athlete, but particularly football, it's so up and down when you're playing. It can, one week you're a hero, next week you're a villain. It can go from hero to zero very, very quick. Obviously for you, Andy, you experienced like an extreme high with Cardiff. Like, you're renowned in Cardiff. If you go back to Cardiff, you never have to buy a drink, etc., etc. Like, how difficult is it as a footballer to kind of deal with those highs and lows?
Well, first and foremost, I think they're indescribable as well. The highs are so high. It's really strange how to describe and compare. That I can only probably describe those kind of highs with the birth of my children. They're that high, and then the lows are so low that it's hard to explain as well to people, because people just think it's just a game of football. It's just you've lost a game, you just had a bad game, but it's not. It's more than that, because you've got pride in your own ability. You've got your own self-esteem. You've got people having a go at you. You've got newspapers, social media, radio, neighbours, going to the pub, people giving you stick, people looking at you funny, jealousy. There's so many things will add to the problems. And how did I get over it? I was extremely lucky that my brother was a footballer before me, so he was a couple of years older than me, so I was able to see what was happening to him, how he dealt with certain things, how I could improve myself from dealing with the mistakes that he made and the successes that he had, and hopefully, but then emulate myself and put my own little stamp on it. The problem that I found though was I played a little bit, quite a lot higher than my brother did, and so I was a little bit lost at times where I wasn't able to copy or compare or emulate what he'd done, because it was at a different level. So you know what I mean. And I spoke publicly on our show about, I had a big decision to make when I was 16. It was going to be a footballer and ditch your friends basically, or stay within your friend circle and get pulled into things which were going to have an impact on me potentially being as successful or a success or being able to play at a high level. So I had to go on my own a little bit and just stick with family and stick with people who I trusted. And that sounds really callous and really unfair, but you know what I mean. I needed to be a footballer because I didn't have anything else in my life. You know, I wasn't a big advocate at the time of going out and trying alcohol and doing all these things. And I just selfishly wanted to be the best I can be and achieve this crazy dream, which everyone told me it was, of being a footballer, because that's what it was. It was a dream. You know what I mean? Because you know what I mean. There's better footballers
millions
than me.
of kids want to do it, don't they?
There's plenty of better footballers than me who never made it. You know, but I wanted it more than anybody, and I would have run over my own parents and grandparents just to be that, just to do what I did. And I mean, I don't regret saying that, because you know what I mean. I know it's only a saying, but I was so proud to do the things that I did at a young age, and then to carry it on as long as I eventually did.
It's really interesting though, that is, because what me and Jacob tried to do with these shows, we do try to add our own experiences in as we go along, and I played like academy level football till about 16, and then I dropped out of the system, and I similarly had pretty much the same choice. Yeah, I had the same choice that you had, that you just mentioned, whereby I really had to either kind of ditch my friends and focus on football, and I don't know if I'd have made it, but I would have got in and carried on at least for a short while, or you know, hang around with my friends, drink, smoke, girls, etc. And I chose the latter. And then my father died when I was 16, which meant the person who had kind of driven me to training and everything and made sure I did all the right things wasn't there anymore. And I was a 16-year-old with a younger brother, a parent who just died. And my mum, you know, she did her best, but you don't want to force a 16-year-old who's just lost his father to go to training if he's saying he doesn't want to. So she was in an impossible situation. And I think there's a lot to be said about the pressures on young footballers, Jacob. Like, I spoke to a lady called Tracy, who was a sports psychologist last year, about specifically like these young players who go through the system from like 7 years old, and then they get to 17, and then the clubs say, oh, we don't want you, you're not good enough, whatever it may be. And they've got nothing, they've got no education because they've focused everything on football, so they've kind of not done as well in school. And I think, obviously, a lot of these shows, we're focusing on things like addiction or PTSD, or like with Andy now, we're going to talk about the difficulties he's faced kind of towards the end of his career and after his career. But there's also a mental health side to the young players who drop out of the game at 16.
And I think that's the problem. Like, if you look in sort of lower League 1, League 2, there's nothing. There's literally, you get dropped, and then we were saying this, you know, I can understand as an employer, if in my work, if someone gets sacked, they're not going to bother to spend time checking if they're all right, how they found that. So I get, as a business side, it makes no sense. But there's, even like for the FA, there's nothing out there for those young players that just get dropped. It's really difficult. And a lot of the clubs, you know, all the clubs will have safeguarding leads, but some of the clubs haven't got a clue about like what to do around just general mental health, or techniques of how to give bad news. You know, some coaches will just go, sorry mate, you're not good enough, do one. Others, you know, I remember chatting to one guy who said, we had a boy with us from like 7 all the way up to 16, and his dad had passed away, like say in May, and the coach just went to my mate, right, you have to drop him. And he was like, well, his dad's died like, you know, a couple of months ago, and he was like, don't care, he's not good enough. And as a business, it's brutal. And I think that's the thing. Like, I think if there was, I can understand the club saying, look, we've got no finances for that. I can understand that. But just something, you would hope there was something around, like,
just the human side of it, though, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
I spoke to a few youth players and said, look, this is what we're doing with the pod. Give it a listen. You're going to get some great experience from senior players just to hear some of their stories. And you think that should be a basic stuff that most players are here, like these youth players are hearing. And I think the pressure, you know, you look at like when Andy was a youth player compared to say someone now, there's similar pressure but different. There's different pressures on different things, like with the social media now.
Yeah, social media has changed the game, hasn't it?
You know, a 16-year-old development player will have his own agent. Some of them are sponsored by Adidas, so they're getting their boots. They're getting told they're going to be, you know, you're going to be the next big thing. Don't worry. And then they get dropped.
But there's no grounded as well, though, Jacob, is there? There's financial as well, you know, that the people call it apprenticeships, but they're going straight in on big money, you know what I mean? Huge money. And I'm not on about wages straight away. It could be houses, it could be jobs for parents, because people are coming over from different countries. It's putting extreme pressure on individuals, you know what I mean? That I'm open and honest, you know, my first wage was £37.50, you know, it's just ridiculous. And you're on that for, you know what I mean? So it's never a financial burden. You're happy to get paid to do something you love, and I don't think there's that enjoyment anymore, you know what I mean? I look at a lot of young footballers, they look miserable, they look unhappy. It's not a hobby to them, it's a job, and when it becomes a job, it becomes personal, and it just becomes a bit of a chore. And when things aren't going as well, then, you know what I mean, like you said, you know, they get dropped because it's a conveyor belt, and that conveyor belt is somebody's there younger and better than you, going to take your place, and clubs don't have the aftercare.
Well,
don't
also,
have the sense to stop it.
I was chatting to our local team, and I was like, "How does this make money?" I was like, "You know, you pay for say 10 staff, the players are getting a small wage, the training and all that." And I said, like, how do you make money for this to be viable? And they said, well, all we have to do is sell one player or one of the players to make it, and then we sell that player. So I think they sold one of their players for something like 850 grand, and that paid for, you know. And I said, I get that, you know, selling one player, but it's a massive risk. And you're basically going, here's 40, let's hope 40 young men, let's hope one of them makes it. I know I can't remember the team. There's one team that have basically scrapped that whole system. I think they're in the Championship, and they do it completely different now. They have like basically A team, which is the first team, and a B team, which smaller development squad. And I think were they in the playoff Championship? I can't remember who was in the playoff Championships last season for Championship.
Brentford against Fulham.
It might be Brentford. I know.
Yeah, I know. Brentford changed up their system because. When we spoke to Reece Weston, they said
I was looking at their system, and it looks so good. Just the way they interact with their players, it's a great way of buying players, selling players, and treating players. Yeah. But yeah, it's just I think in the next sort of, especially with COVID, with how that's going to massively affect contracts. Clubs are going to be like, well, we're not getting the revenue. You know, if we've got a player that we're going to keep him. You know, maybe we don't re-sign his contract as soon because not many clubs are buying big players. But I think, honestly, in the next 5 years, we're going to see a massive push in the negative side sense of young players getting affected by mental health. I think it's going to be...
Yeah, 100%, mate. I think, very quickly, man, before we steer it back to you, can you imagine the pressure on... say a 16-year-old who comes from say Spain or vice versa, and he signs for like a big club like a United or a Liverpool, and they give their family a house and a car in a new country. Can you imagine the pressure on that boy, knowing that the only reason his parents and family are in this, like, moved to the country and have got this big swanky house and all these nice things, is because they're basically gambling on him to make it as a footballer? Can you imagine that pressure, mate, to make it, knowing that if you don't make it, that house is gone? That's got to be ridiculous for a kid. Basically, 16's a kid.
Yeah, but it's a clubs who are at fault. You know. I mean, the whole system just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. You know, that they've tried these things, and that's why they've. The rules were that that you had to be in school from 14 to 16 to be able to sign for a club. So then they just go and buy in players from overseas and stick them in school for a couple of years and stick them in clubhouses for a couple of years. It makes a mockery of the system, and you know what I mean. These kids they're far away from home, which is, you've got to settle in, you've got to learn a new language potentially, you've got to make new friends. You know what I mean. There's all these things which are secondary to football. You know what I mean. The football they've been brought in to do, but they're not there full time. They've got to get an education. You know what I mean. They've got to. The parents have to learn the language. They've got to go out and work potentially. You know what I mean. It's just. It never sat right with me, and it never has, because other countries have had a far better system where they bring in their own, and that's why England have they've had problems with generating national players and a good enough squad, and there's your reason why, basically, in a nutshell.
Yeah, 100%. So obviously, you've had a very successful career in football, playing for clubs all over the UK. For as far up as Scotland, you obviously started with Middlesbrough, played in Wales with Cardiff, Whitby, Halifax, Bolton, Sheffield United. It's a long list of clubs.
Too long.
And I'm sure. I'm sure there's many highs and then there's many lows. When did you start to feel the kind of negative side of mental health in terms of your football career? Was that something which you felt throughout your career, or was it more something which kind of developed like later on?
I'll be honest, I was on the crest of a wave, me, till I was about 24, 25 when I left Cardiff. I think that's when it started hitting me that when I was surplus to requirements at Cardiff City, and I started to think, well, what do I do? I've always played at a level and been at a level as a footballer where I've always, teams and managers have always wanted me, teams have wanted to buy me, teams have wanted to sign me on. So, and now I'm in a position for the first ever time in my life and in my career where a team's told me I'm not good enough. A team's told me I'm not wanted at the team anymore. So now I'm not wanted. I'm not good enough. You know what I mean? So in my head now, it's the first time I've really felt a proper negative from a manager in a club, and it hit me hard. That it took me a while to get my head around it. I spent a lot of time with just my family because I wasn't allowed to train with the first team at the time. So it was, the club had put this stance on why they were doing it to try and get me out of the club, which was their prerogative, which was fine. But it was starting to affect me, and I was always professional. I just wanted to go and play football, and once I got told those words that I wasn't wanted, I just wanted to go out and go and play. So I spoke to my agent, and I spoke to as many people as I could just to try and get myself away. And to be honest, I moved from one country. Well, I moved from one country to another country, surpassed the middle country, went from Wales to Scotland, and just to try and get my love of football again. And I didn't find it. And I struggled for a year. You know what I mean? I had a pretty successful time in Scotland because I was lucky enough to play in a cup final and things, and we achieved what we set out to achieve. But personally, I didn't enjoy it, and I was asking questions every day. Why aren't I enjoying it? You know what I mean? I'm doing something that I love. I'm getting paid for it. You know what I mean? Like I always have. But why aren't I enjoying it? There's something missing. There was something what wasn't there, and you know what I mean? I was starting to think, well, you know what I mean? I need to go back home. I think I need to go back to Middlesbrough. I need to start again. Is this time just to pack in and start something fresh and new? And so I moved the family back to Middlesbrough just to start again and see if it would all rekindle again. And my being with family, being with people who I knew would back me and give me that support I needed. And then I came across a manager who gave me all this love, all this opportunity, just made me feel $1 million when I walked through the door. Chrissy Wilder, who's now manager at Sheffield United, at Halifax Town, and I drove up and down the country, drove 2.5 hours to training every day and 2.5 hours back, just to play for the man, because I just thought he was amazing, and he put me in a really good place mentally. Football wise, I was enjoying my football more than I've ever enjoyed it. At the level I was playing at, people were telling me that what am I doing playing there? I'm far too good to play at that level, but I loved it. I absolutely adored going into training every day. I had a spring in my step getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to drive down the motorway.
Where was that to, mate?
Halifax Town.
That was Halifax, yeah.
Yeah, so I was doing a 9-to-5 job basically, but I spent more time in the car and on the motorway than I did on the football pitch. But I loved it, and you know what I mean. I think that drive was also doing me good. You know, by the time I was getting to training, I was in a good state of mind. I was planning what I was going to do in training. I was planning what I was going to do in a game. After training, I was looking at how I did, how I handled myself in training, games and things. So I think that the drive was starting to do me a little bit of good, and what I learned is, you know what I mean, by the time I was getting back to family time, that I was in a decent place because I wasn't thinking about football anymore. I'd got it all out of my system by the time I'd walked to the front door, which I think was important for me.
So the other thing I was going to kind of ask you about was, like you've mentioned on the show before, on the Monday show and the Friday show, that like the difficulties players face when their career ends or comes to an end whereby it's out of their hands. that's a very difficult thing to deal with. And not many players do get to finish on their own terms, whether it be through injury or eventually the clubs stop calling. Very few players do get that opportunity to finish on their own terms. Looking back now, all these years later, do you feel like you got to finish your professional career on your own terms?
No. I've had to battle through a few demons and battle through being told that I'd never kick a ball again, never be able to really get involved in football again, to try and just prove a few people wrong and prove myself wrong, in order to play like I am now over 40s, which is great, just for my own health and well-being. But yeah, as I say, 1 minute I was playing in a professional game, and the next I was in a hospital bed waiting an operation which was going to save my career, and nothing will ever get me. One thing I'll never forget it. I'll never forget the conversation I had with the surgeon when I woke up after my operation, which told me that basically my professional football career was ended. It wasn't in a place where he thought I could ever play again professionally. I ruptured my Achilles, and it was 99% ruptured. I had the operation, which was very successful, and I've got a few nice. It depends how you look at it. I've got some nice scars to show from my career, which is nice to tell children and tell the kids and stuff. But there's nothing ever gets you ready for it. There was no support mechanism as well, and at the time I wasn't bitter, and I wasn't upset that there was nobody there, because I didn't know any different. But when I see players now who go through the same thing that I've gone through and don't have that support mechanism, there's organisations there which should be doing more, and they're in place for that reason. And I'll say, probably 6 to 9 months I was lost. I didn't know what to do. Every day I was waking up doing the same thing, having the same conversations. I was in a really, really horrible place, and nobody ever gave me an opportunity to do anything. I was just walking around in circles. I was not a very nice person to be around. Very angry, very volatile, upset. I just lost, basically. I didn't really have a clue what was going on. And then all of a sudden, and not really by chance, I think my number was given to a couple of lads at PFA, but 7 to 9 months down the line, if I could have, if they could have got in touch with me, or the clubs were in a better partnership, I'd had a better relationship with them, and it could have been looked after quicker, I would have been in a lot better position. That they gave me this advice, which was great, but then I'd wasted nearly a year, and then by the time I'd gone to college to get my qualifications, which they advised me to do, because I'm not a professional footballer anymore, from earning money to earning nothing. So going from whatever amount a week or a month to earning zero is a huge lifestyle change. And like I said earlier on, I'm a big advocate of education, because having to start over again, if I could turn any part of my life back, the only part of change would I would have tried at school a little bit better, and done my GCSEs, and probably focused from 14 to 16, and still gone down the same path I would have. But it would have saved a good year of my life, having to go back to doing qualifications, which put me in a position where I am now, and put me in a better state of mind, because I learned so much in a year about myself, about other people, about certain things which I wasn't aware of. But for me, I am still a little bit angry and disappointed that the organisations within football didn't really help out and weren't there when I really needed them, because let's be honest, things could have ended a hell of a lot worse for me.
Yeah, 100%, mate. Jacob, like for me, and I'm sure you, as someone who works within mental health thing, for me, I find that angering when I hear Andy talk about the difficulties and that period where, he suddenly had his career taken away from him, and I feel like organisations like the PFA or the FA or whoever it may be, I feel like that's a basic thing that they should be doing, is making sure that these guys, if their career's ended for whatever reason abruptly, don't desert them. Make sure they're okay, because the list of footballers who have high-profile footballers who have had difficulties after their career, is endless, with your Gazas and your George Bests and there's many others, and it frustrates me. And I mean, as someone who works within the mental health kind of scene, if you like, because I can't think of the word for a better, so we'll call it a scene.
No, that's fine.
How does that frustrate you? Because it just seems like a basic thing that they should be doing.
Yeah,
really.
it is, because I think football is this weird bubble. So I know loads of footballers that are struggling with their mental health, and they then, don't know what to do. So they go to their club, and then the club go, ugh, and then go to PFA, and then all this. Where Joe Bloggs off the street will go to their GP, and there's a sort of trail that you go, and you get a really good service. Some people in different areas it might be slightly different, but I think
NHS saved my life, mate.
As
simple as
it's
that.
one of those like weird football. There's so much money, like especially generated, with the Championship and Premier League, that can feed down to the lower leagues. It can feed for just even basics of just going right. Your career's ended. Here's some information, and we know people who are struggling with their mental health aren't always going to go, I'm struggling, can I get some help? The people that are really struggling aren't going to look for the help. It's going to be a family member or a friend, sort of like Andy said, someone that approached him with some numbers from the PFA. So those are what are happening. We're going to talk about Chris later, but some of these people that are, and we spoke about Gary Speed, there's people that are struggling in silence that maybe don't feel at that time they don't have someone to go to because they haven't been given that information. I know as a member of the public that most people in our society that aren't professional footballers know if I'm struggling with mental health, I go to my GP. That is the first line I'll go to.
But why don't football clubs do that? Like when a player goes to them, why doesn't a football club send them to the club doctor
I think a lot of
that
it is
process
stigma.
begin?
I spoke to one guy who'd gone like privately, and one of my work colleagues, he runs his own sort of business doing what we do normal work, but professional footballers. But the levels are a lot lower. So with me, I work with people that are really in crisis, and they've got to that stage where they're really, really unwell. With footballers, it's a lot lower level stuff. But I find it hard to believe that there's these massive, huge companies that are selling private healthcare to professional footballers, offering a small service compared to what the NHS do, but charging a lot more. And even then, they're not even doing it's not that readily available compared to if they would have gone to a GP. But I think it's just basic stuff I think clubs see these players, most of these clubs, whatever they like to say, they see these players as business acquisition. Like they're not people, they're
just numbers,
just asset. Yeah. So you're and that's the real problem, I think.
But I think as well, Jacob, that you said earlier on, it's like, and I said it, I think on Monday's show, it's like a swear word, and you know what I mean, and it's when I say quite, it's a very manly thing being a footballer. You're in an all male. Most of my career, I say 90% of my career was a full male environment where there was zero females there, and nobody wanted to be different. And if that's that you're struggling with mental health or you're homosexual or whatever, nobody ever came out and said this, because you don't want to be different, and you don't want to be ostracized, and you don't want to be seen as a weakness. And
we know football is a small world that talk. I've worked with players that have gone, my number was marked because one manager didn't like me, so he spread the word that I was a difficult player, and I found it hard to get contracts. And I think that's the sad thing. You think I think a lot of these, and a lot of fans will say, "Oh, we're a team." What a lot of the if we actually look at a football team, it's not really a team. It's a group of individuals that are all fighting to be in that first team. So the subs, however much they'll love to say, "Oh, it's a team," they'll want to be playing because they got to pay their mortgage, they got to pay their bills, and so that's the difficult thing. There will be a team mentality, but they're all out to pay their bills. Compared to a generic, everyone wants to play, and so that's a really tricky thing. I think if I'm a sub and I want to be playing, I'm probably not going to go to the manager and say, I'm struggling with my mental health, can I get a bit of extra support? Because unfortunately, it probably will make a difference. It's
not going to help you get selected.
It's not going to help, and that's the sad thing.
I totally agree. You can't afford to show weakness being a player. That people people do see it as a weakness, that it's like it's not the same thing. But if you went to a manager and say you're tired, what's he going to do straight away? He's not going to play you. So you straight away you've shown weakness to somebody in power and somebody in charge. So you know yourself that you won't do that again, or your teammate does it. You don't make the same mistake. So you know what I mean. And I see this as a similar thing, that everything you do on your own, and you're a very close shop, and you probably have probably the smallest bubble in the world, that you probably have one or two people maximum to confide in, who you really trust, and hope that nobody ever breaks that trust.
And it's only literally since I've been doing this stuff, I've worked with some people from women's football, and it's so different. If you look at things like, how many women footballers are out about their sexuality, in men's English football, there's none. And that shows. And so if you look in women's football about mental health, there's quite a lot of big profile players that are talking, like Fran Kirby, who's talked about her mental health. If you look in the men's game, compared to what they say, 1 in 4, let's say in a team, let's say 2 people in that team, I can probably count on 2 hands the amount of current players, probably 1 hand, the amount of current players that have come out about their mental health. And that's their personal, they don't have to, but I think that shows the sort of how...
The stigma's still there, isn't it, within football?
Most of our interviews have been former players, because... Yeah, and all my work with doing mental health and football, I know players that are struggling with their mental health, but the fear is so real that it's going to affect their career or sponsorship and stuff like that. They're going to wait till the end of their career. And the only person I think who's like James Coppinger, I think it hasn't, like, you can see for him, it hasn't changed his career. It's been, if anything, a positive thing for his career. And all the players that I'm aware of that have come out and shared their experiences, it's always been positive. And I always say this to players as well. It's like, if you were to come out and you were treated wrongly, they ain't got legs to stand on. Because
it's like the way the world is now.
But the fear is so strong for the players that it's sad, really.
And this is why I want to do these shows and this series. This is why I brought this series back, and I got Jacob on board, and we're getting people like yourself, Andy, to talk to us about their experiences, is because we want to change that stigma. Like, I'm talking broadly as a society. Like, I'm happy that the stigma around mental health is not what it was when I was a teenager, but there's still work to be done generally. But I think within sport and within football specifically, there's a bit more work than perhaps society as a whole. And you've talked about before with us, like, you fell out of love with the game during that period where you finished, and I was hoping you could just tell me a bit about that. Like, had you had it with football and you weren't paying much attention to what was going on in the football world, and obviously you retrained, started a new career, so was football kind of in the rear mirror and done with, and that was that for you?
Yeah, didn't go and watch games, didn't take an interest in it, didn't watch any games on TV. I felt as though I'd lost an arm or a leg, that it felt like someone had died inside me, that the only thing that had ever been brought up on that we'd gone, and the only thing I was ever good at, I'd lost, and I was really hurting, and I thought the only way for me to get back at it is by hurting it, you know what I mean, by not watching it and thinking that it would make me feel better if I didn't watch it, and the more I did stay away from it, the more I would hurt, you know what I mean. So then over time I'd realised that it wasn't the game what was upset me, it was individuals within the game, i.e. organisations, clubs, for example, you know what I mean, who'd give me bad experiences, individuals who I'd fell out with, and it was only obviously when you grow up a little bit and you become like an adult and you start to rationalise things that you start to think that it's not the bigger picture, you know what I mean. There's certain things what have triggered certain events in your life and certain things, and just try to manage those little incidents for me. It was and that was key. The football has been a huge part of my life, and it always will be, because football is a big picture. it was not the problem which finished me. It's given me every highlight of my life. But the laws, like we were talking about earlier on, it wasn't football in general. It was just certain individuals or certain things or certain people. So, you know what I mean? It probably took me a good couple of years to understand why I was thinking it, or rationalise it, and thinking about it carefully, because, you know what I mean? Like I say, you know what I mean? You're young, you're enjoying certain things of football, but when you get a little bit older, and especially when you come out of the game, you realise what I've achieved. Because when I was in the game, I didn't see anything what I was doing good as an achievement. I just thought, I'm doing it, and it's going to last forever. It was only when I came out of the game that I realised, hey, that wasn't bad, or that was good, or I really enjoyed that, or, you know what I mean, I'm looking forward to doing that. You know what I mean? It was something that I've really respected by coming out of the game.
Did you find Did you find after that injury, that first year after the injury, and where you were struggling with loss of identity of what was going on, did that have an impact on your sort of home life with your family and stuff like that? I think it did, Jacob. But I don't probably. I think it coincided with two things. You know what I mean? I think my injury didn't help my attitude, and with me not being a professional footballer anymore, it had an impact on me financially, which had an impact on my family, and you know, it coincided with eventually, you know what I mean, that me and my ex-wife now we got divorced, and, you know what I mean, which has then broke kids up, it's broke families up, and, you know, as a bigger picture what people don't see, you know, that you know what I mean, that it's taken time for everybody to understand what's happened, and people hurting, because I don't think, you know what I mean, people just think, oh, go and get another job, or, you know what I mean, and that's basically the attitude that some people have, and it's not that easy, you know, especially nowadays in society, that you need that holy grail, you need that piece of paper, you know what I mean, you need that degree, you need these qualifications, all singing, all dancing things to go and do, and you can't just go and get that at Tesco, you can't just go and get that at the shops, you know, you've got to take your time, you've got a plan, and, you know what I mean, and the amount of people who probably did say things that really annoyed me, like things like that, you know what I mean, which would really get to me, and, you know what I mean, and it had a massive impact on me personally, on my attitude. I'd be very snappy. I'd be angry at the littlest things, you know, and it took its toll, and it was only probably until I sorted myself out, or I seen a visual plan or a mental plan of where I could go and what I could achieve, and that there is life outside football, that I realised that I've got an opportunity in life to do something.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, not one, like it was all interesting, but what I mean is one of the things I picked up on there, when you said about that year after your injury where your football career was finished, it felt like you were grieving, like you'd lost a part of you. And I think, look, say if you lost someone, like a family member or someone died, like your friends or your employer or whatever it may be would, you know, they'd rally around you, wouldn't they? And they would check you're all right, and they would see if you needed any help. Maybe you'd go and see a doctor if it continued, and things like this. But because it's football, people don't necessarily do that. I'm sure, like you've spoken before about your family and how supportive your parents and stuff are. But generally, I mean, like, football doesn't do that, and we kind of going back to the authorities and everything should have been there for you, which obviously they should have. But I think I can understand that from footballers when football's taken away from them, it's grief, but they don't get the support that you would get if you were actually grieving, you know, a family member or whatnot. So that's got to be very difficult, mate.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean, I think the stigma what comes with being a footballer is that you're a multi-millionaire and you don't have to work again, so people automatically think you're not a footballer. Well, what's he got to be upset about? Because he doesn't need to work again. He's got that much money in the bank that it's just another job. You know what I mean? He'll go and play golf, he'll go on holiday, and in 2-3 years' time, you might be able to look at doing something different. Well, it's so far away from the truth. It's scary, you know, that yes, we got well paid, you know what I mean, paid better paid than a lot of other people, but money was so different than it is currently, you know what I mean, and I would never begrudge any player who gets paid the amount of money. Yes, they probably do get overpaid, and there's other areas in the world who deserve that kind of money with what they put on the line each day and every day of the week and every day of the year. But It's just one of those things, that money in football has always been pretty good, but now it's unbelievable. Whereas, people just have that stigma of he's all right, he's got loads of money in the bank, or he's driving a flash car, or he's got a nice house. But it doesn't. It's
No.
like I said earlier on. It's you're hiding behind a false
it's
face.
like a facade, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's very false, and you know what I mean. And that's the same as anybody, you know what I mean. Especially with the times that we're going through now, that people will say they're okay because you message them or you'll speak to them, and you know what I mean. I found over lockdown with various things that Zoom calls and are great because you can see people's faces like you could if you were on the doorstep of them, because faces don't lie. You know what I mean. You can see right through some people, where in a text message, on a phone call, you can put a brave face on, like we all have at times. You know what I mean. And we all do it for our parents. We all do it for our kids. We all do it for this person, that person. But you know what I mean. Inside, it's been a tough time. But you know what I mean. It's difficult.
Well, mate, a prime example of that, just very briefly, like I'm not going to go into any detail whatsoever, but like me and you, like a couple of times over the last 6 months, like you have texted me and said you all right, and I've gone yeah, fine, or whatever. I've kind of changed the subject, knowing full well that I'm probably not all right. I was struggling a little bit or whatever, but because it's a text message, it's very easy to hide behind that, and and normally you end up phoning me 10 minutes later then, but there we go, that's another story. It's very difficult, and I appreciate you speaking to us so honestly about the difficulties which you had when your career finished and stuff. What was the turning point for you, do you think, where you kind of came out of that dark period where you'd lost football, and then you started to feel a bit better and kind of come out the other side?
I just think it probably for me it was starting a sports science degree at Teesside University that I just I got my teeth into something that was a 3-year plan, you know what I mean, which was something that I'd never even dreamt of being able to do, by the way, because I'm the most uneducated probably footballer that you can come across at the time. You know what I mean? I hated education, I hated everything what went with it. I couldn't sit down for longer than 30 seconds, but I started to find an interest in certain parts of it, and thought, you know what, I'll do a year and see how it got to 6 months. I was loving it, and I couldn't wait for the next 3 years, and I had all these plans of what I wanted to do and get back into football and be a physio. That was the plan, and I was like 35, 36-year-old with 18, 19-year-old kids. You know what I mean? They were going out drinking and not turning up to seminars, and I was turning up every one. I was in the front row, and I was loving life, and it was you know what I mean, a little bit of a swat. You know what I mean? So I'd done full circle here. And you know what I mean, I loved it, get my dissertation done. I was 10,000 words by Christmas. I'd just finished 6 months early because I just couldn't get it out of my head that I wanted to get it done. So I was all done and dusted while people were leaving things up at the last minute. I was enjoying my life. I was getting back into football, watching football, trying to get into coaching and managing, and you know what I mean. So I was seeing another purpose again, and seeing that there was life after playing. You know what I mean? That the football, it's not just about playing. You know what I mean? Because you get to, even if I was lucky enough to finish on my own terms, that I still would have had to pack in. I still wouldn't have been able to play again. So I just needed to understand and get my head round that there's a bigger life ahead. There's more years ahead than there was during a football career. So I was starting to think of what I wanted to do, and halfway through that, I came across an old physio of mine at Teesside University, and he said to me, have you ever thought about getting into teaching? He said I've seen some of your presentations, and you come across really well, you speak really well, you speak really quick, but he said you speak really well if you can slow it down a little bit. And so I did a few days here and there teaching, and just see if I enjoyed it, loved it, hated kids at the time, but enjoyed the concept of it, and then just decided to get into it. So I used my degree to get into teaching instead of the area which I thought I was going to go into, which was great, really.
Yeah, and I think that's half the battle, is finding something after the playing career. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes people don't have that. Like you've mentioned again, you were lucky, your parents and your family are very supportive, so you did have that little bit of support from the family point of view, even though you didn't have support from the places that you perhaps should have. And you were able to then take that into a new career and fall back in love with football, become a podcasting legend, and as well as unfortunately though that isn't always the case, and earlier this year in 2020, as we record this, a former teammate for Cardiff City, Chris Barker, took his own life. And if you don't mind, I'd just like to kind of really talk about Chris a little bit as a person, but also the kind of the effect that had on you, as well as kind of the difficulties that he would have been facing, because obviously he was still involved within football but not playing.
Where do we start with this one? First and foremost, Chris. I knew Chris's brother Richie from Hartlepool days. So I knew of Chris before he came to Cardiff. So I knew he was this tour rag who was decent at football, who kicked people, who played for Barnsley, who was a proper Yorkshireman, and who was going to follow in his brother's footsteps, who told everybody he was better than his brother. So I always thought, well, if he was better than his brother, he's got half a chance, because his brother was a very good footballer. And then Lenny came to see me one day at Middlesbrough, told me that he'd agreed a fee with Chrissy and at Barnsley to bring Chrissy Barker to Cardiff City. He said, he mentioned me when he'd had talks, because obviously I knew his brother. I'd met him previously. So said, would you go to the hotel and go and meet him? He's waiting for me, basically. So went to the hotel, packed his bags for him, took him to my house. So he lived with me instead of living in a hotel, because I'd done that, and I hated it. I'll be honest. You know what I mean? There's something about getting your washing done for you and getting all your meals cooked, but there's nothing about having your own space and just going somewhere where you wanted to go. You know what I mean? So Chrissy lived with me for a couple of months, and probably regretted it after the first minute, because he was an absolute nightmare. He was a bit of a slob, but he was great company. But we got on like a house on fire, two northern lads, and just talked about football, talked about family, talked about how quick we could get down that M1 after a game, each Saturday after a home game, after a away game, and just hit the ground running straight away. That it was always I think I was probably the only person in the team who could understand him when he first came, which helped. But
translator.
Yeah, basically, yeah. But it was great. You know what I mean? He had a very successful career at Cardiff. He settled down really quickly. He had a daughter in Cardiff with his girlfriend at the time, and yeah, it was absolutely great. I say we went past as new. We still kept in touch. I saw him. The last time I saw him was when I went back to Cardiff, because obviously he still lived in Cardiff. He ended up at various football clubs. I think he finished at Forest Green as a coach, youth team coach, but still lived in Cardiff, so travelled up and down. He had a great affiliation with the city, which was fabulous. And I'll never forget the text message I received from Leighton Maxwell, who's an ex-teammate and friend of mine, and said, "Have you heard the news?" And that's all I got, basically. Nothing more than that, nothing less. So I knew straight away it was bad news. So straight away I went on to social media just to see if anything was on there. Couldn't find anything. I rang him straight away, and he said, "Is it true about Barks?" And I said, "I've not got a clue what you're talking about." So I said, "Give me 10 minutes. I'll ring the kit man Ian Lanning, who was best friends with Chrissy. Ian was, I think he was best. Was he best man, or one of them was best man at one of the weddings and things, and they've been on a holiday every year." So I rang the kit man, didn't answer, and then messages were filtering through that he lost his life, but that was it, basically. And I was probably unconfirmed for probably half a day, you know what I mean? But it was the longest half a day, you know what I mean? Because I knew the family really well, I just couldn't find it in myself to get in touch with people that would be going through something so horrific, you know, that you know what I mean, that I didn't want there to be that person and get that confirmation, you know what I mean. I wanted someone else to tell me that it was true, even though I didn't want to know it was true. And it really hurt. And then I think it was the evening, Saturday evening, and the kit man rang me, and he was at MK Dons at the time as kit man, and he'd left the game because he found out at lunchtime he didn't do the game, and he was driving back to Cardiff, and he just couldn't get his head around obviously the news, and told me, and I was heartbroken, and you know what I mean. It taught me that we don't speak enough, as in ex-people, ex-teammates, friends, that these things are happening too often and shouldn't be happening, and is there a way that we can try and help people and try and make sure that it doesn't happen again? Because yes, this will never bring Chris back, and that breaks my heart, and do you know what I mean? And the conversations I've had with his brother and his family at his funeral, you know what I mean? If I could turn the clock back and just drive to Cardiff tomorrow and stop it all, I would have done. But you know, I mean, unfortunately, that's not the case. But if we can use this as something good to stop somebody else, and to something stupid that be there for people who are struggling, that have messages open, have your phone number here, there, and everywhere, and just be that go-to person to go and speak to, because you know what I mean. Chris was living everyone's dream. He was a professional footballer. He's a good-looking fella, cheeky chap, still involved in football at a really good level, coaching. So if you were an outside looking in, you'd think that he was living the dream and had everything to live for. But you know what I mean. Unfortunately, you know what I mean. It's just. It's a mask. It's just fake, and it doesn't mean that you're doing something that you love, that you're happy. You know that even daughter, who I know you absolutely idolise, by the way, that wasn't enough. So you know what I mean. He's at rest now, and but if he knew half of the love that he had on the day of his funeral, and half of the people what turned up to pay respects for him, I'm sure that things would have ended very differently for Chris.
Yeah, it's very difficult, isn't it? Because obviously, just kind of going back to my own experiences, a couple of people who I know have unfortunately had killed themselves over the years, and it's such a difficult thing to get your head around, because you kind of look back and you replay conversations or situations, and you think about, should I have realised something, or did I, you know, why didn't I phone, you know, that day or that week, or why didn't I phone more? You kind of, it's natural, and it's human nature to beat yourself up over those kind of little things. But ultimately, you've got to try and, I don't want to say use it as a positive, but use it as a gateway to make sure that we don't let it happen to others.
I think you have to say. I think you've got to use it as a positive. You've got to see the positives from it to make sure it doesn't happen to other people. You know that probably for 2 months after I beat myself up that I didn't go to a reunion. You know what I mean? That all the Cardiff City players for the 2004 playoff final, we all got offered to go to a reunion, and it was on a Sunday night, and I was working on the Monday, so it was just impossible for me to get to Cardiff and get back in time to do it. So I just didn't go. And when I heard the news, that was the first thing what stuck in my mind, that why didn't I go? You know what I mean? But if I went, it wouldn't have changed anything. You know what I mean? But it took me ages to understand that it wouldn't have changed anything, because you know, myself, you see, you think I could have seen him, I could have spoken to him, but I wasn't there the night that it happened. So how on earth am I going to have an influence? You know? So I think sometimes there's a bigger picture, and for me, you know what I mean. As long as we can have Chris as a legacy and show people that this is real and it's not going away, and there are plenty of people to get involved with and talk to, that if we can just save one person, 2 people, you know what I mean, we've used it as a positive, and I know Chris's brother and family would be immensely proud if we can continue to do that, because I know Chris's family, you know what I mean, we're broken up with serious illness and family members dying and things, so you know what I mean, at the young age for Chris to deal with. So you know what I mean, I'm hoping that we can use it as a legacy to try and help somebody else.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, you know, like Si was saying about his own experiences, I think from my experiences working in mental health, unfortunately, you know, we've seen a lot of people I've worked with commit suicide, and you go through the sort of those stages of grief of, could I done, you know, anger, could I have done anything differently? I think what it always, for me, it always comes back to, you know, sort of, why did that person feel that there was no one for them to go to? And that's the thing that you can never get to. Like, you know, I know people that have, their family are like, oh, they were loved, you know, everyone loved them, but they do it still. And I think that's the real, for some people that maybe don't have that knowledge of mental health, that shows how strong the power of probably depression can have on someone, where they can have a loved ones around them, but it holds over them so much that the only outcome is suicide. And I think, it's one of those. We said this about when we were talking about Gary Speed. We were saying, it gives people a sort of shake up to go, actually, the grass isn't, it isn't this great life that maybe. I think the best, someone talked to me, they said, once you, because I remember when I first started getting into the football sort of life, I was like, it's really exciting, it's amazing. And someone just said to me, look, once you go past that little curtain and you see what the real life of football is, then you realise it's not all like that. It's all cracked up to me.
That's what people said to me, Jacob. Would I do it again if I could turn the clock back? And normally people would jump at the chance and go yes, But knowing what I know and seeing what I've seen, I wouldn't jump into it straight away. I'd have to have a good think about it.
That's fascinating. That is, mate. Yeah. Really is, because like when you look at the career and the success and everything which you've had, and like you've spoken about again tonight, like those moments of sheer euphoria, but with the benefit of maturity and hindsight and coming out the other side of those dark days, having it, seen obviously negative things happening with other people as well. It's really interesting that you wouldn't just say yes straight away, that you would do it all again.
It's the way I look at this, is the good things that I've done nobody can take away. But if those good things hadn't happened, then you wouldn't know about them anyway. So they haven't happened to you. So you've not lost out on anything. So I just think,
of course, yeah.
It's just it's a difficult conversation. But there's so many pluses being a footballer, but there's so many negatives, and there's so I lived my dream. I did exactly what I wanted to do, but the way it ended and the downsides of it. Being a perfect footballer, you play for your boyhood dream, you score a goal in the major cup final, you finish when you want to finish, and you're content with life and happily ever after. I don't think life would be fun if it happened like that, to be honest. I think I think we're all in this world in the universe for a reason, and but it's certainly a journey, a roller coaster.
After it did happen with Chris, each club have got their former players associations for that club. Did the Cardiff former players society or whatever they call it send anything out to the former players saying, look, this is, if you need support, this is available, or anything like that?
The club didn't know, but we took it on ourselves at the funeral. All the ex-players who turned up. So we created our own group chat on WhatsApp, and we ask daily, weekly, are we okay? If anybody's struggling, everyone's got each other's numbers. Everyone's very open to have a conversation. We help each other out in various things, and that's in life. If anyone needs any advice and help with anything, whatever that may be, if that's family, kids, financial, whatever it may, we're it's always open, and for me, that's the best thing. What's come out of it, and if we could turn the clock back and have Chrissy in there, the chat would be a lot more livelier. Yeah, it'd be a lot more fun. But then there wouldn't be a chat, would there? So and so that it's so it's that's what upsets me the most. I think that just it's something little, but something so big at the same time.
And those are the sort of things that we've, I suppose, have gone through this whole conversation. It comes down to individuals. It came to those individuals at that funeral on the day to go, let's do something to support ourselves.
Yeah.
Where it's great that they do that, but there should also be, we know it takes all these former player associations or groups or whatever, they have a newsletter that goes out every month.
Yeah.
When the meetups, it would have taken 2 seconds to say, here's the number for Mind. Or if, and those are the basic things that I don't know why they're missing in football. It might not just be football, it might just be other businesses. I'm lucky in mental health, we don't really have that. But you hear of other big businesses, like people like Tesco's and huge employers that employ thousands of people, have got great HR departments.
Yeah.
And, like we were saying, it's a strange thing that you think they would be on it. Cardiff's not a small club.
No.
Yeah, football clubs generally, football clubs, authorities are kind of not doing enough to help current players, young players, former players. Football as a whole, I think, needs to have a bit of a revamp when it comes to mental health and have a real good look at itself. I got to be honest. Right, Andy, I appreciate you coming on, mate, so much, and just being honest and talking about your experiences. Obviously, talking about Chris as well. I appreciate that massively. Jacob, as ever, thank you, my friend, for your coming on, joining us, getting involved, and whatnot. And guys, like I always say, if you are struggling or you're just feeling like it's getting all a bit too much, just remember that you aren't alone. We're all in it together. And you'll find in the description for the show there's links to various mental health charities and different things, foundations and whatnot, which are all pretty good, I can tell you from personal experience. And just as a good friend of mine says, keep on keeping on and help each other. You can check out Andy every Monday 7:30 on the Andy Campbell Football Show, where he speaks to top guests from the football world with a very beautiful looking host on that show. He's a legend of a guy. And also on a Friday 7 o'clock, the Andy Campbell Championship Show. We'll be back next Sunday 8 p.m. for an all new episode of Mental Health in Sport Series 2. So join us, as we'll be speaking to Welsh international, or former Welsh international, David Cottrell next week about his battle with mental health and alcohol. It'll be a very interesting show. But in the meantime, be nice, don't be a dick.